Thanks everybody for your patience. Looks like that did the job. We do have folks who are able to connect by phone now. So thanks for hanging in there with us. I'm Kate Meese. I'm an Associate Director at the Local Government Commission. I want to quickly provide a brief overview about the webinar and then cover some logistics, and then I will turn it over to our speakers. As local governments face continually shrinking budgets, reducing energy costs can be a key way to save money. State and local government agencies spend more than $10 billion a year on energy, and EPA estimates that nearly 1/3 of energy used to run typical government buildings can be conserved. What benchmarking does is help local governments achieve substantial energy savings by providing objective energy performance measurements. These performance measurements help local governments set goals, increase the energy efficiency of buildings, and monitor ongoing progress. Many local governments are already using benchmarking to help protect the environment and lower municipal energy costs. So we're going to start the webinar with a discussion of AB 1103, which beginning in 2012 will require energy benchmarking of all non-residential buildings in California, followed by several local case studies highlighting experiences with benchmarking and some lessons learned. Just for a little bit of background, this is the 8th of 15 webinars we will be hosting over the next 3 years through the Statewide Energy Efficiency Collaborative, which is a partnership between LGC, ICLEI, the Institute for Local Governments, and the 4 investor-owned utilities. The partnership was established in the 2009 CPUC decision, and it was intended to help cities and counties reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save energy. Just quickly on the logistics before we get started, due to the number of participants, everyone will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have questions at any time during the webinar, you can type them in the question box on the control panel window, and please include the name of your speaker, the name of the speaker that your question is intended for, and click the send button, and you can write IT if they're IT related questions. We'll be answering as many questions as possible through that function during the presentations, and we'll also have Jenny Woods with LGC summarize the remaining questions for the speaker after each presentation. The presentations from the webinar will be available at lgc.org/seek/webinars, and we'll also be adding a recording of the webinar once it's available. When the webinar concludes, you will be asked to complete a survey. Please take 5 minutes to provide us with your input, which is how we determine the topics of the webinars and help to really make sure that this is something that's useful for all of you. We have a great list of speakers, starting with Justin Rainier, who's a licensed mechanical engineer working in the High Performance Building and Standards Development Office of the California Energy Commission. And at this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to Justin to give us an overview of AB 1103.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Kate. My name is, as said, is Justin Rainier. I work for the California Energy Commission. I'm the project manager for the AB 1103 project. We've got a good presentation today, but if there's anything that is not covered, please feel free to put it into a question. We'll answer it at the end. We could have the next slide, please. So the content of the presentation, we're going to start with an overview, an outline of what the regulations are, the history of them, what the implementation schedule we're looking forward to is, and answer a couple of the most common questions I've gotten, requirements, definitions, California rating, which in the past was a part of legally mandated disclosure of AB 1103, in the future will become a voluntary step, what our next step is, or next steps are, and some useful links for you guys. So we could have the next slide, please. So just as a quick overview, I think most people are familiar with this terminology, but benchmarking is a process of comparing a performance metric against known standards. It happens in lots of different areas in business. What we're looking at specifically is benchmarking the energy use of a particular commercial building against the energy use of a similar typical building according to a national energy survey of CBEX. The Energy Star Portfolio Manager gives a 0 to 100 score for most buildings. There will be a number of buildings in the state of California which will not be able to receive a score just because of the way the spaces are mixed within the building. For those buildings, we will have energy usage be the disclosure that is given to the counterparty. Can we have the next slide, please? So what the AB 1103 regulations will be doing is mandating the disclosure of energy usage at the time of a financial transaction. The three transactions that are triggers for the disclosure are the sale, the lease, or the refinance of an entire commercial building. Now this disclosure is a little different from what we see in San Francisco in that there is no public disclosure of what the energy usage is. The disclosure happens between the owner of the building and the counterparty of the transaction. It's not publicly disseminated. In fact, there's law that keeps this data from being used for anything other than its intended purpose, which is compliance with the disclosure on that particular financial transaction. The regulation has got a staged implementation, but it's scheduled to start becoming effective on July 1st of 2012. Right now we're in pre-rulemaking, and we're trying to get things moved forward so that we can get everybody's input and get the rulemaking going to meet the July 1st, 2012 deadline. I got the next slide, please. So a little bit of history on this. AB 1103 was chaptered in 2007, which established our initial mandate. 2009 we had an update which explicitly allowed the CEC to set the implementation schedule and also stipulated that utilities must upload data, not just supply the data to the owner in a format compatible for Energy Star. Utilities, in this case of the statute, are defined as an entity providing electricity or natural gas. We've put out a few sets of draft regulations reflecting public input, reflecting the changes in August 2009, May 2010, and most recently in September 2011. Those draft regulations are up on the web, actually all three sets, but there's a link to the most recent at the end of this presentation. In addition to these meetings, we've been working with utilities, we've been working with building owners, we've been working with organizations to make sure we're getting as much input as we can on the implementation so that it can be smooth and painless for everybody. The next slide, please. So this regulation is going to come into effect in stages. We're going to start with the largest buildings in the state of California and work our way down to 5,000 square feet, which is the smallest building that's considered in the CBEC study upon which Energy Star is based. So after July 1st of 2012, we're going to be requiring disclosure when a financial transaction takes place for buildings that are larger than 50,000 square feet. At the beginning of 2013, we're going to ratchet that down to buildings between 10,000 square feet and 50,000 square feet. And finally, on July 1st, 2013, we'll be including all of the buildings that will be included for this law, which are buildings that are 5,000 square feet and up. Next slide, please. So one of the most common questions we've gotten is, does this apply to my building? If your building is entirely non-residential, and non-residential as laid out by the legal definition in this slide, then it does. If your building is within the size range and having a transaction within the dates that we outlined in the last slide, then it does. Otherwise, it does not. If you have any questions that are more detailed on that, we can answer simple questions. And you can always refer to legal counsel. Next common question on the next slide, if you don't mind, is at what point in the transaction do I have to provide a disclosure? There's a bit of flexibility here. You have to provide disclosure prior to the execution of the sales contract. That does not mean that you cannot provide disclosure on an earlier timetable. In fact, would imagine that many of the counterparties would like to receive disclosure well before they have to sit down in the room and sign on the dotted line. But that is the legal requirement. You cannot provide disclosure any later than the point at which you present the contract for the financial transaction. So let me get on a little bit to the disclosure requirements, which are on the next slide. So the following items have to be submitted in order for disclosure to be complete. The first is an electronic submission of a compliance report, which is just a copy of the data that is sent or that is used to generate the forms within the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and that's sent within the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. It's an electronic, essentially a click-through. The second is a disclosure summary sheet, which is just almost a cover sheet for the disclosure, which explains what the other three parts of the disclosure are and what the relevance is to the energy usage of that building, and whether that is an average, above average, or below average level of energy use for that particular building type. The third item is a statement of energy performance, which some folks in the audience may be familiar with. It's a simple one-page document that gives an overview of the performance of the building. The other two, the data checklist and the facility summary, are standard boilerplate documents that Energy Star Portfolio Manager generates. And the purpose of including those is to give the counterparty an idea of what the data used to generate this rating and or energy use is. I want to make sure that if the building is represented as having a certain energy usage, it's well understood what that assumption of energy usage is based upon. And that way the counterparty can look and see if that squares with their understanding of how the building is being used, and even try and get an idea of how that would change if they were to change the usage of the building. And the next slide, please. So the next couple slides are a little bit more detailed description of what I've just gone through for you. These are actually the legal definitions from the draft regulations themselves. You probably don't need to go through them in any more detail. These presentations are going to be posted up on the web if you want to refer back to them for any level of detail. If we can skip ahead 2 slides, please. There we are. Great. So we're also planning on offering a California rating. This rating is not legally binding. It's not something anybody is going to be forced to do. But we understand that there are some areas in which Energy Star Portfolio Manager does not completely describe the building population of the state of California. The first, most obvious one is that Energy Star Portfolio Manager doesn't have a great level of granularity in terms of the types of buildings that are out there, and that we're fortunate to have the California Commercial End Use Survey, or SEEC, which has a little more resolution in terms of what is out there. Also, the Energy Star Portfolio Manager doesn't have the same level of resolution in climate zone information, and we have 16 climate zones from the CEC. We've got a pretty granular level of heating degree days and cooling degree days that we're able to use to generate a little more targeted rating. There's a lot more information on what we're thinking of in terms of the rating and rationale for wanting to make an additional resource available to people who want to benchmark their buildings at the link shown on the slide. That's a bit more detail than we should get into in this particular presentation, but my information is also up on the web, and if you want to give me a ring once you're done reading through that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have outstanding. Have a next slide, please. So where we're going next is that the CEC is preparing a package to go to OAL. We're moving from a less formal process where we've had these 3 public meetings to try and get all the stakeholders' input and all the input from people who are going to be affected by this law, into a formal proceeding where the rulemaking is evaluated and commented upon by the public, and We respond on the record, and then it moves towards becoming law. We're looking at having this happen, the proceeding, in the middle of December. The absolute best way to stay updated on all the developments is to sign up for the listserv. I've listed the email address there. The sign-up box is in the lower right corner of the page. It takes literally less than a minute. All you have to do is put in your name and your email address, and we will get you information on any developments that are forthcoming. The next slide has a number of useful links. We've just updated the website with the latest information that we have to make public, the text of the original bill, the text of AB 531, which updated it and superseded it, the latest public draft regulations that we've got, and also a step-by-step outline of the disclosure process. It's difficult to describe in words exactly how the disclosure or how we're anticipating this disclosure to go, but the presentation that we've got here online, we went ahead and we just took screenshots of every step along the way, so hopefully that will provide a little bit more clarity as to what the process is. And with that, I'm going to conclude the prepared presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Can everyone hear me? I guess I was muted. Is a PE required to stamp the statement of energy performance before disclosed to the prospective buyer?
Great question. No, it is not. It is not required that a PE stamp this or a registered architect. Those are the two methods that Energy Star uses to do quality control on the data prior to having a building get the Energy Star and be able to display a plaque. But we are not requiring this. If the counterparty decides they would like to have this happen, that's something that's between the counterparty and the owner, but that is not a requirement from the state of California.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, well maybe people will think of more questions as time goes on. Kate, I think we're ready to go on to the next speaker. Up next we have Leah, and she's going to talk about what she has done in the Bay Area with benchmarking, and she's from the Association of Bay Area Governments.
Hi, thanks for the introduction. We appreciate ABAG being asked to be part of this discussion on benchmarking. We are pleased to have been and continue to be part of the team educating local governments. And as you can see, it's both the Association of Bay Area Governments, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, and Energy Efficient Funding Group. Next slide, please. The Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, is the official council of governments representing the Bay Area's 101 cities and towns and 9 counties. Just in case you're not familiar, there's our map and our geographic distribution. Next slide, please. So formed in 1961, ABAG, as the region's planning agency, initiates innovative programs and projects and builds partnerships to address regional economic, social, and environmental challenges. Our research and analysis, financial services, and other cost-effective local government service programs are widely recognized. ABAG Power provided a gas, electric, and gas aggregation pool. We currently provide a gas aggregation pool, and ABAG Power was also the energy watch for the San Francisco Bay Area for several program cycles. In addition to work on energy upgrade, Bay Area Information Center, electric vehicles with Ready Set Charge California, ABAG holds 2 Pacific Gas and Electric Green Communities contracts. Next slide, please. You are all more than likely aware of the Green Communities programs, but I just wanted to provide a little bit more background on that. Next slide, please. ABAG began with an effort to train local government staff and interns to understand and complete a GHD for local government operations in conjunction with ICLEI. This is our first Green Communities programs. We successfully conducted our round of inventories earlier this year with a series of presentations to city councils. We were also contracted to provide benchmarking training courses for the local governments in our region. Next slide, please. So as Justin mentioned, this is of course using the Energy Store Portfolio Manager. And as you can see, we had a set goal, and was to significantly increase the number of local government buildings benchmarking using this tool. And as a test, ABAG's Energy Program Manager benchmarked our building, and we discovered some interesting things. That the building meters included the parking lot and the BART station across the street from our building, which is why we got a benchmarking score of 6. Even with the energy retrofit programs that ABAG had recently completed in our building, we still ended up with a 6. Next slide, please. As a local government, and with our score of 6, we were very pleased to partner with an experienced instructor, Mark Jewell, with Energy Efficiency Funding Group. Mark has been involved with the development of Portfolio Manager and conducts training classes on it and many other energy efficiency topics for PG&E and other utilities, local governments throughout California and the nation. Next slide, please. What we did. There are 7 Energy Watch programs in the Bay Area serving 8 counties. Some of these are county programs, some are run by nonprofits, and some are run by for-profits. We conducted outreach to all the Energy Watches through a series of meetings, emails, phone calls, to assess the interest of the Energy Watches and their local governments. Based on this effort, we designed and offered hands-on courses for benchmarking training using attendees' facility data. This allowed attendees to actually benchmark a real building, and by the time they had returned to the office next morning, they had benchmarking scores in hand, or excuse me, on email. Next slide, please. In addition, because we were offering courses all over the Bay Area, we developed an online registration available if the Energy Watch preferred. The online registration also allowed us to distribute the required forms. Next slide, please. How it worked. Cannot stress how helpful it was with the assistance provided by the Energy Watch partnerships to get the trainings done, and also, of course, the expertise of our instructor. As I mentioned before, the classes allowed for actual benchmarking during the class, which demonstrated how easy the program was to use. We also worked with the Energy Watch to create what we call the maintenance class to accommodate different requirements from the local governments. One of the Energy Watch programs had an AmeriCorps intern that had benchmarked almost all of the 19 cities' buildings in San Mateo County. The maintenance meeting illustrated what she had identified and detailed how the cities were going to maintain the program going forward. After several rounds of standard training had been completed, we developed a specialized class called ABS Only. Mark Jewell also teaches at the Pacific Energy Center and had already trained some of our local government staff, but those classes did not go over Pacific Gas and Electric's automated benchmarking service, also called ABS. If there's questions about ABS, I will take those, try to address them at the end. This tool populates Portfolio Manager with data from meters, easing the data entry requirement associated with Portfolio Manager. So we did a special recruitment effort to train local government staff who had already taken Mark's training on already taken Mark's training on Portfolio Manager, also on ABS. It is a very useful tool. Next slide, please. Silicon Valley Energy Watch is a project run by Santa Clara County and includes the county and 15 cities and towns. They were very interested and involved in getting their jurisdictions trained, as were the other energy watches in the Bay Area. However, in this case, we provided a wide variety of training courses. The first session was for the City of San Jose and several departments of Santa Clara County. And out of that training, we ended up with one department of the City of San Jose benchmarking 75 buildings. The 4 other training sessions captured 9 cities and towns and 28 students from an energy training program established by Silicon Valley Energy Watch. One more session is planned for November 1st. Next slide, please. As you can see, this team effort has trained 92 local government staff in 53 Bay Area jurisdictions. We have offered 15 classes in 7 Bay Area counties, and we have an additional training scheduled in November. At the request of PG&E, we've also trained local government staff outside the San Francisco Bay Area in the North Coast area. Next slide, please. We did it, exceeding the CPUC goal for benchmarking in the Bay Area. We are continuing our activities, offering additional trainings as needed, and we're looking right now at developing training for local governments on getting those energy efficiency projects done that were identified during the benchmarking. I am happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Leah. That was a great presentation. If anyone has any questions, can you please ask them now in the question portion of your screen? And if not, we can move on to our next presentation. Okay, well, if anyone comes up with any questions, please feel free to ask them in the question box, and we can always answer more questions at the end of all the presentations.
Great, so next up on the agenda we have Heather Miranda, who works for the City of Santa Clarita with the Environmental Services Division, and her duties include NPDES permit compliance, watershed protection and restoration, air quality improvement, energy management, and green building. So we will turn it over now to Heather.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to share our experience with Energy Star Portfolio Manager. I'm going to be talking today about how we used the benchmarking through Energy Star Portfolio Manager on our Green Business Incentive Program. Next slide, please. City of Santa Clarita, we're actually the 4th largest city in Los Angeles County. We have about 176,000 people. We're a very large city, 52 square miles. We're only second to the city of Los Angeles at an actual area. We there's a lot of different things that have happened up here in history, and we do a lot of, there's a lot of filming that happens in our valley. But one of the things that we're really proud of right now is in the last 2 or 3 years, we've gotten a lot of national and state recognition for more of our of the green efforts that we have aspired to implement in our community. Next slide, please. So This is the city of Santa Clarita. Just to orient you, the 5 and the 14 freeways make the triangle at the bottom. The Santa Clara River flows through the center of our community, and we are in one of the furthest north cities in Los Angeles County. Next slide, please. So we have, what we had done is we responded to the Great Recession by implementing something called our 21-point business plan for progress. And as part of that plan, there were several green collar or green jobs related types of programs that we implemented. And the one that was most important to this discussion is to utilize the energy efficiency and conservation block grants to support our local businesses. Next slide, please. So we received a $1.5 million EECBG grant where we funded 3 different programs. We had outdoor lighting with our parking lot lighting. We also have been working on our redevelopment area. Our brand new Newhall Library will have a LEED Silver or Gold rating. It's in the middle of being built. You can actually see its progress being built on our webcam. And that will have a 20,000 square foot new building and a transit-oriented redevelopment area. And then the last thing was the Green Business Incentive Program, which is what we asked people to benchmark as a result of. Next slide, please. So essentially, we were providing these grants to assist small businesses reduce their total energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, fossil fuel emissions, improve their energy efficiency, or to reduce commutes by single occupant vehicles. We allowed businesses to apply for efforts that would have done any of these things, but they scored better if they had multiple benefits. Next slide, please. So we had an application process, and it was important. Benchmarking was a critical part of the application process and to getting their final check. So we had a workshop, and I'll talk about how benchmarking was addressed in that workshop. Submitted an application with including a benchmarking report, so that was something that they had to do as a condition of just applying for the money. They had to sign our contracts and our city agreements and agree to a lot of the ARA required reporting, and those of you who have gone through ARA reporting know that we need a lot of information, and so we had to contractually obligate these small businesses to provide that information. They had to get perform the work, obtain the permits to perform the work if necessary. We also had to have them do labor compliance with our labor compliance folks, submit the required reports, which included a post-project benchmarking report. Next slide, please. They had to achieve at least a 10% energy savings if they were going to do something to their buildings. So these are examples that we provided that people could do. Most of the applications that we got had to do with lighting retrofits. We had a couple of solar applications on some highly energy efficient buildings. Next slide, please. And then we also were trying to provide a local incentive, and this is where we were trying to help our local businesses, or we were helping our small businesses, but we were also trying to help our contracting community. We would provide 75% of the cost, with the business providing 25% of the cost if they hired contractors within our city limits, and then everybody else had to provide 50% of that cost. It was the majority of people were a 50-50 cost. Sure. Next slide, please. So they had to provide a benchmark analysis, for their annual energy consumption, final energy report, and they had to use Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And on the next slide, I kind of go through the rationale for why we chose Energy Star Portfolio Manager. It was free, and we're dealing with small businesses, and so free is good. We wanted to have a standard measuring stick for all the different businesses if they were doing like work. AB 1103, which we already had the presentation on, it was in order to help our small businesses with coping with regulation, which is something that we do regularly. It was easier for us to report back to the Department of Energy for the EECBG funds using the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. We had some small business owners who may not have the best energy technical skills, and they're in the business of doing what they do, and most of them are not in the business of energy management. So we thought that it would be a little bit easier for them to do Energy Star Portfolio Manager. That was sort of a mixed assumption, which I'll deal with later. And then, of course, the autofill, the ABS program was a really important key, because once we could get our businesses to enroll in the Energy Star Portfolio Manager and get that in there, they could have their monthly bills auto-filled into reports. So that made it very easy for them for the post-report, or so we thought. Next slide, please. And another critical component of this is the Community Energy Partnership. We've been involved with the partnership since 2004. There's a nonprofit partner called the Energy Coalition, Southern California Edison, Southern California Gas Company, and then 7 other cities. This partnership really helps us with technical assistance, outreach. In the past, they've done more direct install work, but they're a critical component of the Green Business Incentive Program, and were extraordinarily helpful in getting these programs off the ground. Next slide, please. And this is just their mission statement. So basically, what the Energy Coalition does is right in line with what they did for us for the portfolio manager work. Next slide, please. So during our workshops, the Energy Coalition, in addition to the application process, Energy Coalition provided a component of teaching people how to use Energy Star Portfolio Manager. They walked through the process with the small businesses, tried to explain to them how to use it, what kind of information they were going to need, what the benefits are, and they were key in providing follow-up questions and support to our city staff, and technical questions from our small businesses. And any success that we did have with this program, a lot of it had to do with the fact that the Energy Coalition and the Community Energy Partnership was involved. Next slide, please. So the results of the program were mixed. I think we had a $300,000 budget for this project in the EECBG, and only $175,000 were actually utilized by small businesses. We had 18 businesses that we awarded contracts. There was a variety of types of projects that were funded. Mostly they were outdoor lighting projects and indoor lighting projects. We did have 2 solar projects that we allowed for some highly efficient buildings. They had eaten their vegetables before they had come to us for solar. And the benchmarking was actually very helpful in improving that point, which was important. And then one was a CNG fueling station that was not a building, so they obviously were not able to benchmark. We actually ended the program in June 2011. We were just not able to get a lot more interest of small businesses in applying for the awards. The successes that we had, we really improved the awareness of energy with the small business community. We had a lot more small businesses come to the workshops than actually ended up applying for the grant, but they found out about a lot of other types of energy efficiency programs that was good. We actually had 3 businesses apply for Energy Star. They had gotten a high enough rating so that they could apply for Energy Star, and I think more were eligible, and we were trying to talk to them about that. And of course, the compliance with the Future AB 1103, that was really important that they kind of got a jump on that. And just one of the challenges in running a program like this, and the city of Santa Clarita, we just don't have a lot of staff. We never really had a lot of, we always ran thin as an organization. And of course, a lot of cities are experiencing doing more with less. But small businesses, these are not big companies, big corporations with lots of resources. They're small businesses, and they need a lot of support to utilize benchmarking. And even with the great training that we got during the workshops, a lot of the business owners just simply didn't understand or they couldn't take the time to figure out what they needed to do. And some of them actually needed to hire technically proficient consultants in order to actually do it, which is an additional cost that we did not provide for in the grant nor in the program at the time. And I think that was one of the gaps. If we had had that, we might have been able to get more people. It might have been more successful. Next slide, please. So I would actually, I think the previous program, if their program melded with our program, it would have been perfect. We needed a dedicated person who could just, walk businesses through, spend like an hour with each business to just go through Energy Star Portfolio Manager and tell them how to do it, what each box means. And maybe having several hands-on trainings held, just locally, because small business owners just will not leave our valley. It's just not. They just don't. It's a very small club up here, and they just will not leave the valley. And so it's important. It's just a time thing. It just takes a lot of time to get out of Santa Clarita and go anywhere else. So I think if we had had a lot more hands-on training held locally, to just have the business owners with their energy bills sitting right there and say, okay, put this number here and this number here and this means that. If we would have had something like that, I think we could have also been a little bit more successful. Next slide, please. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
For that presentation and for your insights. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now, but if anyone does have a question, please feel free to write them in the questions box, and we can get to them at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Looks like our presenters are doing a good job covering all the information with no questions. Our last speaker is Courtney Kalashian, who's an Associate Executive Director of the San Joaquin Valley Clean Energy Organization and implementing partner of the VIEW Partnership. Courtney is an energy efficiency enthusiast who works with her 3 team members to improve the quality of life in the valley through the promotion of clean energy. So I'll turn it over to Courtney now.
And thank you very much, Kate, for the introduction, and to everybody on the webinar. I apologize, our office complex chose to repave the asphalt outside my window right about the time this webinar started. So if there's a lot of background noise, I do apologize, and if it does happen, I'll just try to talk loudly over it. So thank you for your patience. Before we get started, and I'll ask for the next slide, please, I'd like to give an overview of our partnership and who we are. VIEW is a local government partnership between Southern California Edison, Southern California Gas Company, and the 6 cities and 2 counties listed at the bottom of this slide. I work for the San Joaquin Valley Clean Energy Organization, a regional clean energy nonprofit, and we were contracted by the partnership to implement the program. Our VIEW territory is approximately 15,000 square miles, and it's predominantly rural farmland. Our major cities are roughly 20 miles between with open land, and our local municipalities have anywhere between 12 and up to 1,000 utility accounts. So there's quite a big difference in who we're dealing with and how we're approaching the projects. We have met our electric goal for the partnership cycle. We have not yet addressed our gas goal, but we hope that 2012 will have more projects coming down the line on the gas side. To date, most of our projects haven't been mostly pumps, wells, and lighting upgrades. And our project pipeline for 2012 going forward is roughly over 12 million kWh. So we're very proud of the work that our communities are doing on the electric side. Through the partnership funding, we're able to do 8 community outreach events per year, 2 classes, because we are fortunate enough to have an energy education center here in Tulare, and then strategic plan support, which is where benchmarking falls into what we do. Next slide, please. And so the question is, why 3.1.1? And I assume at this point that most of the people on the call are vaguely familiar, at least, with the California Long-Term Energy Efficiency Strategic Plan and the menu options that were made available, especially for partnerships to select from. The 3.1.1, it does deal with benchmarking, and it's specifically adopting a benchmarking policy. And why we chose it was because we really had, I can't say we, but our founding partners had an insight that data would be the roadmap for this partnership. And when we launched in 2010, we were all very fortunate to be just at the right time. All 8 local governments had recently accepted their EECBG funding, and menu selections for support of the Long-Term Energy Efficiency Strategic Plan had just come out. So our partnership was able to develop around the goals of the strategic plan. The founding partners did understand that jurisdictions would need a solid understanding of their energy portfolios and ideally an energy management system for each of the 8 partners. However, the embedded strategic plan dollars for this section was roughly $80,000. We knew there was no way that that was going to afford it for all 8 of our partners. So it was decided that the local government partners would make the best use of our implementer, our resources, and use the benchmarking as a way to serve all 8 jurisdictions equally. We find that the data is so important because it does provide that roadmap for local governments as they move through the partnership life cycle. Knowing what we know now, we probably would have started this work right away. We find that knowing more about energy use and allocations of funds would have allowed our cities and counties to make, if not better, at least different decisions about the projects that they undertook in the order that they went after them. We recognized the data was going to mean so much more than just what the projects were that they would be investing in. We knew that the results obtained through Portfolio Manager would be included in the Energy Action Plans, another strategic plan offering that our partnership is working on. The Energy Action Plans do have a regional consistency, but they are customized for each jurisdiction's specific needs. And knowing what is being spent, where, and why, well, that's a necessity for any sort of smart planning to take place. We did understand, AB 1103 would be coming forward. We also knew that most of the local governments we were dealing with weren't going to be having the time to meet those requirements. So it just all fell together at the right time for us. So next slide, please. The first milestone that the partnership set up was to draft an easy-to-use manual that was going to do 3 things. And it was going to explain why we benchmark. It was going to show step-by-step how to use the EPA Portfolio Manager system and explain what to do with the data once you have it. And I will say the reason that we chose the EPA Portfolio Manager system at the time was in early 2010, that was the most accepted system, as I think most people are now aware. We also found that being free, being widely accessible, it was going to make the most sense for us as an implementer to be setting up and then passing off to our partners. So the first step was we did write benchmarking made easy, knowing that it had to be just that. For those that know me, I am so not a technical person. My training is actually in event design, so I could draw you a lighting scheme for like an award show, but I could not tell you any of the mechanics behind it. So it was very important that I be able to understand this so that it would be passed off, so that if there was an intern or if there was a new staff coming on, if they didn't have a technical background, that they'd be able to pick it up. And so that was very important to us. There's also a lot of wonderful technical documents about the Portfolio Manager system that are out there. And I have read almost all of them in order to get to where we are with the benchmarking made easy. But again, it needed to be something that we could hand off that wouldn't have a lot of time-intensive training behind it. So that was going to be the real foundation for what we were doing. And so my goal was to not let it exceed 10 pages, and it didn't. The whole thing, how you benchmark, why you benchmark, and what to do with your data fits onto 10 pages total, and it's actually really big font as you go through it, so it's probably even less than that. But again, it was with the intention of making it simple as possible. Next slide, please. And okay, so it's amazing how much work had to go into this project before a single facility could even be loaded into Portfolio Manager. And VIEW has been very fortunate that we have our project coordinator or organizer extraordinaire, Maureen Hoff. The picture on the left hand of your slide is actually Maureen. She tells me this is what she looked like before the project started, and the endless hours of spreadsheet have aged her 20 years. The truth is, this is Maureen at 4, and while she doesn't look exactly like this, I would say she's being overly dramatic. I think it's also her not so subtle point is that this takes a really long time, and it's a lot of time spent buried in Excel, and I'm not going to make it sound like it's not, because it is. The thing is that the time and the investment of effort is definitely worth it in the long run. So while it's a pain, it is worth it. Essentially, to her chagrin, we turned Maureen into a human EMS, and she was able to collect the gas and electric data for all 8 partners. She then merged the various accounts to represent their actual facility. We are 2 utility partnerships, so we had to take gas data and electric data, and we had to figure out what buildings those went to, because they're not represented in a cohesive manner by the 2 utilities. So it was Maureen's job to figure that out, scrub the data for accuracy, and then provide each local government with a comprehensive overview of their energy portfolio. She also worked, and in some cases she is still working with our jurisdictions on some of the the slower ones, to gather the space use characteristics for each facility with a utility account. She's actually created a template that's very similar to the one that Portfolio Manager uses for their automatic upload, but because some of our jurisdictions don't have enough accounts to qualify for an automatic upload, we're still using a very similar template, but we just want to make sure that as we're gathering information and they're providing the information to us, that it's all being categorized in a logical and easy to understand manner. Again, going back to making this as easy as possible for anybody that comes along into the project. For the past 3 months, Maureen has been going out in person to provide one-on-one training with our local government staff. We always ask that more than one person participate in the training, because we want to make sure that the process continues even if there is staff turnover. We also want to make sure that understanding there's going to come a day when Maureen might not be here, I might not be here, the VIEW partnership might not be here, but we want to make sure that it's a sustaining project that continues for our local government, so that they don't have to abandon something that's probably making a large difference for them. Next slide, please. And so as Maureen's helping our cities and counties load in their facilities, I've begun talking to them individually about adopting the benchmarking policy in their jurisdictions. And again, going back to why we selected this menu option, the whole menu option really is about this adoption of a policy. But it's really hard to get to that point unless you know what your data is and where it is. So I think that that was a lot of the legwork that had to be done before 2 very, what I consider simple pages were put together and are actually now implemented by our partners. So we're going through, and in this final selection of Benchmarking Made Easy, we call it, I love it, how do I create a benchmarking policy in my local government? So what it does is it covers 5 steps to making sure making the best use of your Portfolio Manager data. The first step, we like to say, is determine what your goals are. So as viewed as part of the Southern California Edison Energy Leader Model, where each partner has reduction goals they must meet if they want to proceed on the incentive tier level. They are encouraged to, not forced to. It's an option, and it is a rewarding option. So that's an obvious goal, is to reduce the use in KWH to meet their tier level goals. However, your own goal could be something as simple as, we want to reduce energy use in traditional office spaces in our municipalities by 7% over the next 32 months. Or you could even say something more generic, like, we want to reduce our overall portfolio by 5%. The beauty of this is it's your goals. You just have to decide what those goals are. So the next step is to get your team together. And I was actually just having a conversation with a more northern-based local government about this process earlier in the week, and I said, you know, we steal this concept from the city of Beaumont because they shared it and we liked it so much. But the truth is there's green sleeper cells out there within all of our local governments, within all of our areas. And it's not necessarily those people that are assigned to an area that deals in sustainability, green aspects, energy efficiency. You may not even know that they have an interest in it, but it's probably a personal passion. And deciding that, you know, depending on the size of your local government, there could be 1 or there could be 20. It just really depends on how large of a jurisdiction you are. And so we encourage, you know, small flyers up in break rooms. If you have a newsletter within your local government that you can put information out there just saying, oh, you know, there's going to be a small 10-minute meeting. If you're available, please feel free to join us. Because the point is, awareness happens with ownership. And so the more people that you have that are really of the same mindset, the easier it is for you to work towards your goals. And then it becomes less something that one person's having to bear the burden of. So once you have your team together, you want to figure out how you're going to support your goals. And what is it that you're going to do to get to where you're going? There's 4 options we identified. There's the energy audit, which there's sometimes a cost associated with. But what your energy audit can tell you is, you know, some easy no-cost or low-cost options to pursue in your goals. The other one is an awareness campaign, which is something that we're actually going to be looking into in support of other strategic plan goals in 2012, which is really the education of our local electeds and other municipal employees. So a lot of where you're going in your goals is going to have to depend on the buy-in from those that you work with on a daily basis. The third step is to make your commitment formal. And this is really the most important part, but when you think about it, it's so incredibly simple. The EPA has kindly provided a language that one could insert into a resolution to be adopted by your council or your board of supervisors. The one on the slide here is representative of our VIEW partnership. All of our partners passed a resolution to be a part of this group. This would just be in support of that. You can change it to say what you need it to say for what you're doing, and what it does is it just basically says, you know what, we have this data, we are going to continue to access this data, and we are going to use this data in support of our goals, whatever those might be. And it could just be that you want to know where the best investment is for your dollars. When there's not a lot available to make investment spending with, it's good to know where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. And that could be what you incorporate into your resolution. Whatever it is, that's up to you. And that's, again, the beauty of what this project is. The fourth step, then, is to track your progress. And again, this is why we love Portfolio Manager. You can actually track your progress in the General Facility Administration section. So that gives you the option of seeing how your improvements on energy saved and the amount invested. The Track Energy Use Performance feature you can input not only current and future improvements, but past improvements also. And we had some jurisdictions that in early 2002 did very, at that time, progressive efficiency projects, and they weren't going to get wrapped up in their baseline year of 2004. So we've gone through and helped them to manually input those years of data for energy use, and then what we're doing is assisting them in putting in what those projects were in 2002. So they're getting a more comprehensive view. And our final step is to recognize achievements. And I think that you can do all of the work, you can get all of the data, but you're not going to have a really continuing program until you start recognizing the good work of the people that are doing this for you. You can recognize on multiple levels. You know, you can do it as an individual, you can do it as teams, or by facility. And that's why we like Portfolio Manager again. We can look at it as an implementing partner, and we can help our jurisdictions to look at it and export reports on their energy use. So we can do a wastewater treatment plant to wastewater treatment plant comparison, or we can do city hall to city hall comparisons, or office space to office space comparisons. And so what it becomes is a motivating competition amongst our jurisdictions, so that they are all taking pride in their reduced energy use, and they're actually making the region a better place because of their commitment to this. When you're looking at teams, it could be, you have groups within your local governments or different departments that are really making an effort, and they're reducing their use. Or if there's an individual who goes above and beyond that really is committed to the process, that's somebody that should be recognized too. And it doesn't have to be in a huge way. There's simple things to do, just word of mouth. Again, going back to putting up something in the break room. If your local government has a newsletter, something in there. Our communities are very small, and a lot of them have their own publications, so there could be a mention in the local publication about really great work that's been going on. We are also working to develop window clings for every single physical building that is put into Portfolio Manager. And it's not going to be anything huge. It's not going to have a lot of information on it, but the point of it is to get this all tied together, so that when you're walking into an office and you see the window cling in the corner, you realize, oh, I've seen that before, and you remember, oh, this is part of the sustainability project that my local government's a part of. This is part of the benchmarking that I've been hearing about, and this is part of our reduced energy use. And so what we're doing is trying to instill energy efficiency as a core value within the municipalities by educating and encouraging local government staff to take ownership of their energy use. We all spend more time in our offices likely than we do in our own homes, sad to say, but most of us don't have to pay for our energy use in our office. And so what we're trying to do is, without a financial incentive, how do you get a large group of people to start buying in and taking responsibility for their energy use? I'd love to say we had the results of that now, but again, that's what we'll be doing with the rest of the partnership in 2012 in support of the other strategic plan goals. And it's our hope that through that education, that the community becomes more educated, because we know our local government employees are more than just employees. They're citizens of the community as well. So if there's just knowledge and acceptance, we're hoping that it spreads throughout. Next slide, please. And again, the EPA has a bunch of wonderful things, and this quote just basically says, local governments can achieve a lot. They can save a lot. They can be leaders in their energy reduction. They can raise public awareness. They can improve facilities. And they can, do things like incorporating energy efficiency into procurement. But they can't do any of this without the data. And so, there's the wonderful quote is, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And the data that you get from Portfolio Manager and the data that we're getting for our VIEW partners from Portfolio Manager is giving the understanding of what we have and how we can improve upon what we have. And it's making data work for you, and it's using that to make really wise investment decisions in your community's future. And it's also helping to be very smart about your energy use. And so we think that the efforts behind benchmarking, we think that the time and some of the challenges that we face really have been worthwhile, because now as our local governments are starting to get their data back, they're seeing, you know what, if we're going to look at spending in 2012 in the third quarter, maybe this is where we should be spending it. And if that's something that we can do for all 8 of them, then I think that our efforts have definitely been well worth it. Next slide, please. And that's really it for what I have to say. If you have any questions, my email address is up there. Most of my work was around drafting the how-to manual and work on the policy. If you have questions regarding the actual benchmarking and walking through that with a local government, Maureen's going to be the one you want to contact for it. You can reach either of us on our toll-free number listed at the bottom of the screen. And that's it. And next slide, just so we can make sure that we give proper acknowledgement. This is, again, Southern California Edison and Southern California Gas Company local government partnership. We are funded by California utility rate players and the California Public Utilities Commission. So we have our website at www.viewthesavings.com, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Courtney. We have 2 questions for you and for the other speakers. The first question is, are there good templates for adopting and implementing benchmarking policy at the local level?
I would be more than happy. I don't know, Jenny, if you want to be the one to send out our PowerPoint presentation, or anybody who wants the template, please feel free to contact me. Both utilities have said it's fine to share the information that we have put together. And so I think the easiest template is the one that's in the document that was on the slide, because it's, you know, a quarter of a page long. And so we find, you know, the simpler the better. And we're really making the best use of our local government affairs office to help us as implementers assist the local government staff on our projects to get their boards and boards of supervisors and councils to adopt these resolutions. So it's on the EPA website, but it's sort of varied. So again, anybody who wants it, it's free to take it off my presentation, or they can contact me for the actual document.
Great. And just a reminder, the presentations are all available on our website, which is lgc.org/seek, and they are already up there. The next question we have is, what would Heather and the other speakers think about training AmeriCorps volunteers to use and to train local businesses on Energy Star Portfolio Manager?
This is Heather Miranda. I think it's a great idea. The more we can get youth involved in getting people out there to talk to small businesses and get out there and help them, I would be all for it. It would be a really low-cost way for us to be able to do that, and it's just a matter of making sure that they come to the community and have a good mechanism for a good venue, I guess, a trusted venue for them to come out. So they'd have to work with the local chambers of commerce and things like that, places where the businesses have trust to be able to utilize it.
Yeah, this is Justin Renier. I think that'd be great. In fact, we've got a program funded under ERA for Energy Smart Jobs. We're training California Conservation Corps members to do energy audits. So I think that this is proven to be a really good model, and one that we'd be happy to see going forward.
This is Leah Zippert. As I mentioned during the presentation, one of our energy watches, San Mateo County, had an AmeriCorps volunteer benchmark approximately 10 jurisdictions, and several other of the energy watches were training local community college students to serve both with benchmarking and other energy auditing. We also have, PG&E has an innovator pilot program with the County of Alameda Office of Education, and they are looking at training, again, local community college students, and then possibly some high school students. So that idea is definitely out there, and I can provide more information about that, about the programs I've mentioned.
Great, thank you everyone. Are there any last questions? If so, you can quickly type them into the question box and we can get those answered for you. If not, I'll leave it to Kate to close up the webinar.
Okay, and you do have all our presenters' emails up on the screen right now, so you can feel free to download their presentations from our website or go ahead and contact them through email to follow up individually. So thanks again to all our speakers for sharing with us today, and thanks to all of you who tuned into this webinar. We really hope that you found it useful. Please take a few minutes to fill out the survey. As I mentioned, your input will really help us to offer events that cover the topics that you're most interested in. So that concludes our webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us.